One begins by reframing the idea of getting rich away from shortcuts and hype, and toward a clear, practical understanding of how wealth is actually created over time, because most people fail not due to lack of intelligence or effort, but because they misunderstand the rules of the game they are playing, believing money comes from luck, secret tricks, or sudden breakthroughs, when in reality, it comes from consistently solving problems at scale and capturing a small portion of the value created. And the first mental shift is to stop thinking like a consumer who asks, "What can I buy?" and start thinking like a producer who asks, "What can I build, improve, or distribute that many people want or need?" Since money flows toward value and not toward desire alone, and this means understanding that wealth is not the same as income, because income is what you earn today, while wealth is what you build that continues to earn even when you stop working, such as skills, businesses, systems, equity, and reputation. And once this distinction is clear, it becomes obvious why trading time for money through a job has a ceiling. Because time is limited while leveraged through technology, media, capital, people allows effort to scale without a direct one-to-one exchange. And this is why many wealthy individuals focus early on acquiring high-value skills like sales, communication, problem-solving, and decision-making. Because skills compound, just like money, and open doors to opportunities that are invisible to those without them. And alongside skills comes mindset, not in a motivational sense, but in a practical sense, where patience, long-term thinking, and the ability to delay gratification become unfair advantages since most people give up too early or chase fast results, while wealth favors those who can stay consistent through boring phases and temporary failures. And it is also critical to understand that risk is not something to avoid entirely, but something to understand and manage. Because avoiding all risk usually guarantees mediocrity. Taking calculated risks with asymmetric upside is how progress is made. Meaning you put yourself in situations where the downside is limited but the upside is large, such as learning a new skill, starting a small online project, or investing time into education that increases your future earning power. And another foundational truth is that money follows responsibility. Not in the sense of working harder for less, but in the sense that the more responsibility you can handle effectively, the more value you can create. And this includes responsibility for decisions, outcomes, and people. Because society rewards those who can solve bigger, more complex problems reliably. And to do that, you must learn how money actually works, including basic concepts like cash flow, assets versus liabilities, opportunity cost, and compounding. Since without this knowledge, people often earn more but stay broke due to poor allocation of resources. Compounding deserves special attention because it applies not only to investments, but also to habits, learning, and relationships, where small, daily improvements, when sustained over years, create massive gaps between those who started early and those who delayed. And this is why starting now with imperfect action beats waiting for perfect conditions, because time is the most powerful multiplier. And equally important is environment, as the people you listen to, the content you consume, and the standards you accept shape your financial trajectory more than motivation ever will. Meaning, if you normalize debt, excuses, and short-term thinking, you will unconsciously replicate those patterns. Whereas if you surround yourself with ideas focused on ownership, growth, and value creation, your decisions naturally align with wealth-building behaviors. And ownership is a key theme because renting your life through subscriptions, loans, and dependencies keeps you trapped. While owning assets, even small ones at first, shifts power back to you. Whether that asset is a digital product, a YouTube channel, a brand, a portfolio, or a skill set that cannot be easily replaced. And the modern world offers unprecedented access to leverage through the internet, where a single piece of content, code, or design can reach millions at near zero cost, making it possible for individuals without traditional advantages to compete globally. But this also increases competition, which is why differentiation and authenticity matter. Because copying others leads to price wars and burnout, while unique perspectives and consistent execution build trust and attention over time. And attention itself has become a form of currency, since those who can capture and hold attention ethically can direct it toward products, services, or ideas that create income. And this is why learning how to communicate clearly and persuasively is one of the highest return skills available today. And yet none of this works without discipline. Because ideas are worthless without execution, and execution is sustained by systems rather than motivation. Meaning routines, habits, and processes that make progress inevitable, even on days when you feel uninspired. And it is also crucial to understand that getting rich is not about proving anything to others, but about gaining freedom over your time, choices, and energy. Because chasing status often leads to overspending and stress, while chasing freedom leads to investing in assets that buy back your time. And as this chapter closes, the core message is simple but demanding. Wealth is built by learning how to create value, applying leverage, thinking long-term, managing risk intelligently, and executing consistently while most people are distracted. And if you internalize these principles early, you stop looking for magic formulas and start building a foundation that can support real, sustainable wealth over time, which sets the stage for the practical strategies that follow. As the foundation from the first chapter settles in, the next step is understanding how those principles translate into real-world action. Because knowing how wealth works is useless without a clear direction for applying that knowledge. And this chapter focuses on the transition from awareness to execution, where most people get stuck due to fear, confusion, or information overload. And the key idea here is that getting rich is less about doing many things at once and more about doing a few high-impact things exceptionally well over a long period of time, starting with choosing a vehicle for wealth creation that aligns with your skills, interests, and the realities of the modern economy, since no strategy works universally. Are everyone, but certain patterns repeat across almost all success stories, such as ownership, scalability, and leverage. And this begins with understanding that you cannot outsave your way to wealth if your income is low, which means the primary focus early on should not be extreme frugality, but income expansion through skill acquisition and opportunity selection, because cutting expenses has a floor, while increasing income has no ceiling. And the fastest way to increase income without capital is by becoming highly valuable in a specific area where demand already exists, whether that is digital marketing, video editing, copywriting, programming, data analysis, sales, or content creation, since the internet has globalized competition, but also globalized opportunity, allowing individuals to sell skills across borders, and once a skill is chosen, the real advantage comes from depth rather than breadth, because being average at many things rarely leads to leverage, while being excellent at one thing makes you hard to replace and easy to reward. And this requires deliberate practice, feedback, and patience, as progress is often invisible in the early stages, which is why most people quit before results appear, not realizing that skill development follows a lagging curve where effort precedes reward by months or even years. And during this phase, it is essential to detach ego from outcomes and focus on the process, because obsession with results creates emotional volatility that leads to inconsistency, while commitment to the process builds momentum and his income begins to grow. The next mistake many people make is lifestyle inflation, where expenses rise alongside earnings, effectively keeping them in the same financial position despite working harder. Which is why conscious control over lifestyle choices is critical. It's not to live poorly, but to maintain a gap between income and expenses that can be invested into assets, since that gap is what fuels future freedom. And investing here should not be misunderstood as immediately jumping into complex financial instruments, but rather investing first in yourself, your tools, and your systems. Because returns on self-investment often outperform traditional investments in the early stages. And another major transition at this point is moving from linear income to leveraged income, where effort is decoupled from time, and this can take many forms, such as building a personal brand, creating digital products, starting a content channel, launching a service agency, or acquiring equity in a business. But the common thread is that these models allow work done once to pay repeatedly. And this is where patience becomes even more important, because leveraged systems often grow slowly at first and then accelerate, creating the illusion of overnight success, when in reality years of unseen work preceded the breakthrough. And fear plays a significant role here, especially fear of failure and judgment, which stops many people from putting their work into the public arena. But avoiding exposure also avoids opportunity, since feedback, attention, and trust only come when you are visible, and learning to treat failure as data rather than identity is a crucial skill, because every unsuccessful attempt reveals information that improves the next one. While avoiding attempts guarantees stagnation, and as projects grow, decision-making becomes more important than effort, since the wrong decision consistently applied can be more damaging than no effort at all. Which is why learning to evaluate opportunities based on leverage, scalability, and long-term upside is essential, rather than chasing trends purely because they are popular. And this also applies to partnerships and collaborations, because who you work with can either multiply or drain your progress. Making alignment of values, work ethic, and vision more important than short-term gains. And at this stage, systems thinking becomes a powerful advantage, where instead of relying on willpower, you design your environment to support productive behavior, such as setting routines, automating repetitive tasks, and removing friction from important actions. Because discipline is easier when the system is designed correctly, and this extends to financial systems as well, like automatic saving, investing, and reinvestment, which reduce emotional decision-making and enforce consistency. And consistency itself is the hidden force behind most wealth. As small, repeated actions compound into massive outcomes over time, while sporadic bursts of effort rarely sustain results. And another critical concept is time horizon, because those who think in years make very different decisions than those who think in weeks. Choosing assets over liabilities, learning over comfort, and ownership over convenience, and this long-term lens also reduces stress, since temporary setbacks lose their emotional weight when viewed as part of a longer journey. And as momentum builds, it becomes important to protect focus, because distraction is one of the biggest threats to wealth creation in the modern world, where endless content, notifications, and comparisons fragment attention, reducing the ability to do deep, meaningful work, which is often where the highest value is created. And protecting focus may require saying no to good opportunities to preserve energy for great ones, and learning to measure progress not just in money, but in skills acquired, systems built, and autonomy gained, because these are leading indicators of future wealth. And as this chapter concludes, the central lesson is that getting rich is a process of alignment, where skills, income, spending, investment, and time horizon work together toward a single direction. And when these elements are aligned, progress becomes inevitable rather than forced, setting up the next stage, where wealth is not only built, but protected and scaled intelligently over time. As the journey moves into a more advanced stage, the focus shifts from simply building wealth to protecting it, multiplying it, and ensuring it serves a meaningful purpose rather than becoming a source of stress or confusion. Because many people who manage to increase their income, or even become wealthy, still fail to experience true financial freedom due to poor management, lack of structure, or unclear priorities. And this chapter emphasizes that wealth without control is fragile, while wealth with intention becomes a powerful tool for long-term security and impact. And the first principle here is understanding that as money grows, complexity grows with it, which means casual decision-making that may have worked at smaller levels can become dangerous at larger scales, making it essential to develop clear rules around finances, investments, and risk exposure. And this begins with diversification, not just in the traditional investment sense, but across income streams, skills, and assets. Because relying on a single source of income, no matter how strong it appears, creates vulnerability to market shifts, technological changes, or external shocks. And diversification reduces the risk of total loss while preserving the upside of growth. And alongside diversification comes the importance of liquidity, since having access to cash or easily convertible assets provides flexibility and peace of mind, allowing you to seize opportunities or handle emergencies without being forced into bad decisions. And another major shift at this stage is moving from short-term optimization to long-term sustainability, where the goal is no longer maximum speed, but consistent, durable growth, because burning out, cutting corners, or chasing every opportunity often leads to instability, while steady systems outperform aggressive but fragile strategies over decades. And this is where understanding incentives becomes crucial, both your own and others. Since systems tend to follow incentives rather than intentions, meaning if your business model, investments, or partnerships reward the wrong behaviors, problems will eventually surface. And aligning incentives correctly helps maintain integrity, quality, and growth over time, and protection of wealth also involves legal and structural considerations, such as separating personal and business finances, documenting agreements clearly, and understanding basic legal and tax frameworks, not to exploit loopholes, but to operate intelligently and reduce unnecessary risk. And while these topics may seem unexciting, they often make the difference between lasting wealth and temporary success, and as wealth increases, so does exposure to noise, advice, and pressure, making it critical to develop TEI's ability to filter information and say no. Because not every opportunity is worth pursuing, even if it is profitable, and clarity of goals becomes a powerful filter here. Since knowing what you want your wealth to support, whether that is freedom, family, creativity, or impact, simplifies decisions and reduces regret. And this leads into the concept of using wealth as a tool rather than an identity, because tying self-worth to net worth creates emotional instability, where market fluctuations affect confidence and peace of mind. While those who see money as a resource remain calm and rational even during downturns, and scaling wealth also requires upgrading thinking, because problems at higher levels are rarely solved by working harder, but by thinking better, delegating, and designing smarter systems. And this often involves letting go of control in areas where others can perform adequately, freeing your time and energy for strategic decisions, which is one of the highest leverage activities available. And trust plays a major role here, as building teams, partnerships, or even passive investments requires trusting others while still maintaining accountability. A balance that is learned through experience rather than theory. And as systems mature, resilience becomes a priority, meaning preparing not just for growth but for downturns by stress testing assumptions, maintaining reserves, and avoiding excessive leverage that can wipe out years of progress in a single bad cycle. And this conservative approach may seem slow during good times, but it proves invaluable during uncertainty. And at the same time, growth should not stop, because stagnation carries its own risks. So the goal becomes intelligent expansion, where opportunities are evaluated not just on potential returns, but on how well they fit into the overall strategy and risk profile. And as this chapter reaches its conclusion, the final perspective is that getting rich is not a finish line, but a phase in a longer journey of building a well-lived life, where money supports choices rather than dictates them, and true success is measured not only by financial metrics, but by control over time, its alignment with values, and the ability to contribute beyond yourself. And when wealth is built with patience, protected with wisdom, and used with intention, it becomes a source of stability, freedom, and lasting impact, completing the journey from understanding money to mastering it in a way that endures.